Okay, let's work an example of a fertilizer calculation, starting out with one a little more simple. And let's say I have a pre-mixed water-soluble fertilizer that is 15-5-15. And I want to make up 2,000 liters of solution. And when I have that solution in the tank, I want it to contain 200 parts per million nitrogen. So that's basically our problem. The first place to start with on this would be remembering that 200 parts per million nitrogen, we don't know how to measure that really, so we convert that. 2,000 parts per million nitrogen by definition is equal to 200 milligrams of nitrogen per liter. As you recall, for our fertilizers and things, a definition of a part per million is a milligram per liter. And we're talking about wanting nitrogen, the amount of nitrogen that we actually want. So we need 200 parts per million, or 200 milligrams of nitrogen per liter. The problem we have is we're using 15-5-15. So by weight, that fertilizer is only 15% nitrogen. So the way we accommodate or correct for the fact that it's not pure nitrogen, we divide what we want by the amount of nitrogen that's in the fertilizer expressed as a decimal point. So 15% would be, as a decimal, 0.15. And I'm going to put all of the units down as I do this the first few times. I know if you're like me, you're a little more intuitive about math, and you just want to know the logic. And I know that other people are really keeping up with units and how they cancel out. So I'm going to do that here the first few times. So what we're doing is dividing what we need in the way of milligrams of nitrogen per liter by the percent nitrogen in that fertilizer expressed as a decimal place. And the units then for this would actually be milligrams of N per milligram of 15-5-15 is technically what these units are for those of you doing that. And those, it's 15%. In 1 milligram of 15-5-15, there would be 0.15 milligrams of nitrogen. For those of you not doing the units, that's just kind of drives you crazy here. Don't worry about it. So we divide the 200 milligrams of N per liter by the 0.15 milligrams of N per milligram of 15-5-15. And what we get is this cancels out when we divide, and we come away with 1333 milligrams. And remember, when we divide fractions, the numerator and the denominator flip. So we come away with 1333 milligrams of 15-5-15 per liter. Now, that now changed. Here's the key thing to note. We divided the milligrams of nitrogen we needed by the amount of nitrogen in the fertilizer. So instead of being 200 milligrams of N per liter, which we wanted, that did a conversion of telling us how much of the fertilizer we needed per liter, because we're going to be measuring out the fertilizer. Let's divide that by 1,000 just to convert that to grams. There's 1,000 milligrams per gram, and I want to deal with smaller numbers here. So it's the same thing as 1.33 grams of 15-5-15 per liter. And I needed to make 2,000 liters, so I multiply that by 2,000 liters. And I come away needing 2,666 grams of 15-5-15 in that 2,000 liters of final solution. Or you can make it 2.666 kilograms. So the whole key here on this kind of a calculation, there's two things to think about. We take this part per million nitrogen and change it to milligrams of nitrogen per liter. Again, that's just a definition thing. And then we're going to divide. We can't measure out the nitrogen. We can't pull the nitrogen out of the fertilizer. We need to know how much fertilizer to put into that solution to get this 200 milligrams of N in a liter. And the way we do that is dividing by what percent nitrogen is in the fertilizer, expressed as a decimal. And when we divide these, we come away with the 1333 milligrams of the fertilizer now, something we can weigh out. And then you just play around with, okay, how much of the volume? I mean, if it had been 1 liter that we were making up, you'd be done. But in this case, we wanted 2,000 liters, so we had to multiply by 2,000. So there's an example. I'll post more examples where we'll be adding some different versions of this kind of calculation as we go along.